So if there's one thing that's kind of frustrating about trying to codify the genres of anime is that, well, action and romance and mystery are all easy to pick apart. Mecha and sci-fi, fantasy and isekai, superheroes and superpowered action can be exceptionally different. By the same token, magical girl and magical girlfriend are two completely separate genres. No one would ever confuse Sailor Moon for To Love Ru. Well, okay, maybe your grandparents would be, but they're too busy worrying about eating muesli to think hard about them funny cartoonies that the kids are watching nowadays. But I honestly have an astonishing dislike for those sort of shows, and it's not just because I'm an old curmudgeon. Probably, at least. But overall, there are some very big problems with these shows that just drive me up the fucking wall. And far, far away from these kinds of shows in general. Now, as usual, I'm talking in very broad terms to get to the meat of this particular genre. I don't particularly care if Oni-chan Fuck Me Gently gets really good in its third season and should give it a world, nor do I care if Will They Won't They in Another World is the kick in the ass the whole genre needs. Don't at me, is what I'm saying. I can't scrub through all this garbage with a fine-tooth comb because who's got that kind of time when there are shows from the Reagan administration that I still want to watch? So the main conceit of the magical girlfriend genre, whatever else it may be called, is that normal guy gets stuck with a girl from another walk of life, who usually has problems with clothing and Japanese norms. She also usually has some kind of superpower. Gee, that sounds an awful lot like one of those weird old Nick at Night shows like Bewitched or I Dream of Jeannie, doesn't it? Well, congrats on the no prize, because they're actually directly spun out from that. Because of this, I think the genre has a lot of really obnoxious holdovers from the decade in which it was created. For example, in spite of being hitched to a witch, Darren and other Darren is still clearly in some sort of control because of the cultural norms of the 1960s when the shows were being produced. But he's also entirely a reactionary character because when Samantha does something magical, the power is her own, or her mother's, depending on the season. So, when your male lead is designed to be both in control and out of his depths, there's a hard dichotomy to dice with there. But given that current Japanese writers' rooms seem to labor under the assumption that we write this show this way because that is how this show is written, there is no real consideration of that dichotomy when working on the story itself. There are two major examples of the way that these characters shake out. The most immediately recognizable is Lum from Urusei Yatsura. Now, there's a gal, I tell you what. But the thing about Lum and Ataru, the main character, is that Ataru is a shitbag. He's lecherous, stupid, and loutish, which goes very hard against the grain of what the main character in most modern magical girlfriend shows are. When he's being a shit and Lum takes him to task, she's communicating that, and I can't believe this has to be said, it's not cool to do whatever he just did and to straighten up. She's beating the stuffing out of him conceptually and is doing it as a strange form of catharsis to see this sack of smashed assholes get fried. Lum is doing a public service. The more typical thing is Belldandy from Ah My Goddess, who's not so bad on her own, but she is about as interesting as a bag of white bread. She represents the archetype of the perfect Japanese woman, an idealized character who represents a strange, quote-unquote, perfect feminine identity. Compare against the quote-unquote cult of domesticity for more of an idea. Likewise, Keiichi, her erstwhile boyfriend, is just dull. Which is weird because he's a motorcycle jockey and plays in a band, so you'd think he'd have something a little bit more going on. But even they're not the typical pair, because they're weirdly pure and almost grossly mawkish.
Ooh, look at me. Oh, I'm just so dull and boring. Isn't that wonderful, honey?
Oh yes, dear, I love how one-dimensional and completely poorly written you are. I'll just give up all of my cool things that make me interesting to be with you.
Oh, so will I, honey. We'll be the perfect boring couple together. Bub, 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 bub.
Those two examples are the least odious, or I suppose best, that this genre has to offer. No, what really has my ire bubbling is what the genre has been boiled down to in the last couple of years. The main characters with no characterizations. Female leads with nothing outside of an inability to keep their clothes on to attract attention. Making characters who exist to fill a kink role instead of a story role. Yeah, get the pitchforks and torches out because I'm going to tell you that a lot of your favorite shows suck. In a very roundabout manner, actually, but whatever. So let's get to the problem of milquetoast characters to start off with. I understand that audience surrogates are necessary, sure, but when the characters are there to be aggressively normal, it stops being, oh wow, I feel like I can relate, and starts being, if I emulate this guy and have no defining features, I too can land a magical girlfriend with no work. Otaku ruin everything, kids. Or maybe it's just the people I know. Anyway, the point is here that there's no effort put into writing these particular characters because there's nothing to put effort into. Even the ones that I enjoy, like My Bride is a Mermaid, I couldn't really tell you one thing about Nakasumi's personality other than he screams a lot when Sun is around. But I remember a lot about Sun and Lunar because they were interesting and clearly had some thought put behind them. How many of you remember what the main character's name was in Monster Musume? That's an unfair question because they mostly call him a bunch of pet names. But the point stands. The main character doesn't need a name because he's a puppet for the kind of dudes who watch these shows obsessively. So now the main characters have no character, but they're still in some sort of social control with astonishingly powerful women who are just gaga over these idiots. Darren has never been more boring. The next problem is that these girls are homewreckers, most of the time literally. The problem with magical power is that it has to get taken to extremes to make any impact in a modern age. When the genre was first created, post Bewitched, there was only so much explosive power that could be brought to bear. But now we have Lamia and aliens and mermaids and robots and goddesses with no real cap on what they can do. At their least destructive, they blow up houses in dogged pursuit of their paramour. All in the name of comedy, of course. And when you see something blow up for the first time because of, oops, I walked in on you in the shower, it's funny because it's an overuse of force for that kind of slight. But when you see Lala from To Love Ru ride in on a shark to interrupt a confession wearing nothing but a smile, you think to yourself, man, this shit is worn out. Magical girlfriends are there to mess up the order of things, which some main characters desperately do need, sure, but for the most part they're there to make the main characters' lives miserable. Oh, sure, they don't mean to, but it's hard to take that seriously when it happens every episode or two. Aw, isn't it sweet that Toru wants to help out Kobayashi, except she does it by booting in her door and trying to feed her dragon meat? Oh, what a charming goof. Fuck off, Toru, you're a freeloader, and all your dragon friends are perverts and nut jobs. Oh, hear that? It's the sound of my subscriber count dropping. Honestly, I think this might be an age thing, though. This is the part of my life where I agree with the grown-ups in a kid's movie, isn't it? Well. So these magical girlfriend characters come in, insinuate themselves in the main characters' lives, and they don't even have the good decency to keep themselves decent. Fan service of all shapes and sizes, caveat for being traditionally attractive, of course. Even the characters who might be interesting end up just wandering around with their busters out like it ain't no thing. It's alarmingly dehumanizing for these characters. Even when the romantic angle is decent, it just falls apart in the face of bubble-headed idiots with disintegrating clothing. Chobits is especially bad for this, but that show has way bigger problems than just fan service. If the girls aren't actively destructive, they're doe-eyed idiots with less personality than the main character. Yes, that's right. You heard me. You can have negative personalities somehow. You can be a black hole of personality. And because of the cross-pollinations, or cross-contamination, if you catch my meaning, with harem shows, there's just tons of characters to spin into your lolis and your bakunyu and your suns and your yans and your himes and your idols and your whatevers. The problem is with this genre that is like the Xerox generation at Disney, except with recycled characters instead of recycled animation. Those clever writers have spun it down to its very basics without putting in the work, and that's what makes the whole genre just dull to watch. I think at the end of the day, what makes me the most irritated about these rom-coms overall is that the standards for what makes them good are just in the gutter. The best ones from recent years are still just doing the same things that the other ones did, but they don't even seem to know why. And, well, yes, you can be super reductive with any genre like this. It's also worth saying that you have to work just a little bit harder to be reductive with genres like mecha or fantasy or even isekai stuff. The tropes are so solidified in this particular genre that they're nigh unsinkable, and when you just crank it out, why change anything? So why do I think Magical Girlfriends suck? Because it's Mad Lib's writing with easy slotting in of whatever character design the wind blows in. But hey, sells, so it must be good, right? I know, another episode comes to a close with Prof complaining about new anime, but, there are series in this genre that I do actually like, that I highly recommend to people who do enjoy the genre. That stuff includes My Bride is a Mermaid, Elemental Gilade, which is kind of a stretch, Midori Days, which is also a bit of a stretch, Saber Marionette J, which is more typical, and parts of World of Narue and UFO Valkyrie were amusing to me, though maybe not for the same reasons as other people. There is good stuff in this genre, of course, but by this point, it's just a chore to sift through the dirt to find the gold. You know, it dawned on me as I was making this video that I could just make reviews of this sort of stuff by finding and replacing character and show names in one script, but I'm positive somebody would catch on faster than I expect them to. Maybe if I ever want to completely immolate this channel, that'll be the way to do it. But I guarantee you, you ain't rid of me that easily. That being said, this is Professor Otaku, the greatest American anime critic, signing off.